My name is Daniel Ross. For 26 years, I was a police officer in Phoenix, Arizona. I served the department, the badge, the community with no scandals, no sick days, and no second chances given to people who crossed the line. And just 1 week before my retirement, I was suspended for misconduct I didn't commit. They said it was about protocol. They said it was about a complaint. But I knew what it was really about. It was about a check, a pension check, and a promotion someone else had their eyes on. The day it happened started like any other. Coffee, vest, patrol. At 10:42 a.m., I responded to a domestic disturbance in South Mesa routine, but messy. A father had come home drunk again. The neighbors heard yelling, a child crying. I diffused the situation, logged the call, cleared it. By 1 p.m., I was back in the squad room writing my report when Internal Affairs walked in. Two men in plain clothes, badges clipped to their belts, eyes like concrete. Officer Ross, you're being placed on immediate administrative leave pending an investigation. For what? I asked. Use of excessive force and unlawful detainment. You kidding? We're not. My badge was taken, my service weapon removed, and the commendation I was set to receive next week vanished. Just like that. I drove home in silence. I didn't even turn on the radio. When I got there, my wife Marcy was already waiting on the porch. I saw the news, she said. It had already leaked to local press. I hadn't said a word. I didn't do it, I whispered. I know. She hugged me. But behind her eyes, something else. Worry. Doubt. I went inside, took off my uniform, Saturday on the couch. It didn't feel like home anymore. The next few days were a blur. Lawyers, statements, internal interviews. They played body cam footage carefully edited, missing pieces, muted audio. A witness statement surfaced. Anonymous claimed I roughed up the suspect and threatened to shoot. I had never drawn my weapon. But now, it didn't matter. The department wanted a scapegoat. I was a week from retirement with a $210,000 pension and lifetime medical. They weren't just firing me, they were erasing me. I reached out to my old partner, Sergeant Howard Bell, now head of the union. They've done this before, he told me. Early retirements cost too much. They bait guys out with false claims, settle them quietly before court. So what do? You fight, and I help. That night I called my brother-in-law Wes, a lawyer in Flagstaff. You have everything documented? He asked. Every call, every arrest, every minute. I kept my own notes for 10 years. Then we go to war. He didn't sleep. I opened my basement lockbox, pulled out 2 decades of reports, printouts, body cam backups, Iowa memos I'd archived, and found something, not just what proved my innocence, but what exposed a pattern, dozens of similar suspensions, all within months of retirement, all with similar claims, all settled quietly before court. A racket, a department-level fraud. They weren't just taking my pension. They were stealing from dozens of officers, and I had the paper trail to prove it. The next morning, I was up before the sun. The house was still. Marcy had gone to stay with her sister. 2 towns over said she needed space until things settled. He didn't blame her. What was happening to me was like a wildfire fast, irrational, and threatening to burn everything I'd built. But now I had fuel of my own. 22 old personnel files, names of officers who had faced sudden misconduct charges just months or even weeks before retirement. 6 of them had the exact same anonymous phrasing in their internal reports, and the same internal investigator, Captain Mitch Delaney, a name I once respected, a man I once trusted. Until now, I printed the documents, taped the timeline on the garage wall, lines, names, dates, red string, like some scene out of a crime drama. Except this wasn't fiction, this was my life. And theirs? I met Wes the lawyer at a coffee shop off Indian School Road. He flipped through the printouts like a machine. This is organized fraud, he muttered. Institutionalized. And I have originals of most of the redacted versions, I added, plus emails from officers who were pressured to resign quietly. He nodded slowly. You're not just suing for wrongful termination anymore, Dan. We're talking racketeering, pension theft. This could go federal. I don't want revenge, I said. I want the truth exposed. Good, because truth burns a lot longer than anger. 2 days later, Wes filed the initial civil suit in state court and notified the U.S. Department of Justice. By Friday, the Phoenix PD had frozen my pension. Retaliation, plain and simple. That same day, I got a message on Signal. Anonymous number. You don't know who you're messing with. Drop the case. I screenshotted it, sent it to Wes. Then I changed the locks on my house and installed a new surveillance system. I wasn't scared. I was ready. Meanwhile, support began to surface. A former captain, now retired in Flagstaff, emailed me. I always thought something was off. They came for me 2 months before I hit 30 years. I took the deal. Regret it every day. Then another. Then another. We weren't isolated. We were a pattern, and patterns told the truth. A week later, Wes and I met with Special Agent Linda Kwan from the DOJ. She wore no badge on her lapel, no emotion on her face. But when she read the compiled records I'd printed out, something shifted in her eyes. How long has this been happening? At least a decade, Wes said. And you're willing to testify? She asked me. Anywhere. Anytime. Good. Because if even half of this holds up, your department is sitting on a criminal powder keg. That night I drove out to the outskirts of the city, to a rundown diner where retired officers sometimes met for coffee and stories about the old days. I walked in. Faces turned. Some nodded, others looked away. But one man stood up. Enrique Velasquez. Badge number 00742. Wrongfully retired 6 years ago. He extended a hand. We heard what you're doing, he said. You're not alone anymore. Back at home, I found Marcy sitting on the porch, a suitcase beside her. I was wrong, she said. I let fear get in the way. I understand. You're not just fighting for yourself, are you? I shook my head. She stood. Walked to me. Then I'm staying. You fight. I stand. The next day, a letter arrived by courier. No return address. Just a wax seal on the back. Inside, a single sheet of paper. Typed in bold. Drop the case or we drop you. Under it, a photo of my patrol car taken that morning. And I understood. They weren't playing around, but neither was I. It was 2:13 a.m. when I heard the click. Not loud, but unmistakable. Someone had just opened my backyard gate. My hand moved automatically to the drawer. Glock 19, still licensed, still legal. I waited. Still. Silent. Another step. Then a shadow moved across the camera feed on my phone hooded. Lean. Glancing back over the shoulder. They didn't know I'd upgraded the infrared. I called 911. Reported a prowler. Didn't mention my name. Let them respond blind. And then I waited. 3 minutes later, the lights of a cruiser flashed through the blinds. By the time the officers reached the yard, the figure had already slipped through the side fence and disappeared. They logged the call, took a statement, but I could see it in their eyes. They recognized me. And something had shifted. Once, I had been their brother in blue. Now, I was radioactive. Wes came by that morning with breakfast and bad news. They filed a counterclaim, he said, sliding a thick folder across the table. What for? Breach of confidentiality. Claiming you disclosed privileged internal operations to outsiders. I gave facts to the feds. They don't care. They want you tied up in court. I flipped through the stack. Legalese. Pages of exhibits. Statements from the same IA Captain Delaney now claiming I was mentally unstable. Wes took a sip of coffee. They're throwing everything at you, hoping something sticks. So what now? We hit back harder. That night, I emailed Agent Kwan at the DOJ. Attached. 3 video files. Backup footage. Complete. Uncut. They showed my final domestic call, the one they claimed had been violent. The reality? I had calmed a drunk man down, separated him from his wife, and stayed with the child until child services arrived. No weapons, no threats, no misconduct. Kwan called within the hour. This changes everything, she said. Are you moving forward? We're assembling a task force. But I need one more thing. What? Proof that this was a pattern, not just corruption, but a systemic cover-up. I had just the thing. I met Ricky Velasquez at his storage unit on the east side. He pulled out a banker's box labeled Watchdog. Inside were photocopies of pension freeze letters, resignation pressure memos, and even audio from a conversation he'd secretly recorded with Delaney. We can't afford to pay out all these lifers, Delaney had said on tape. Better they go out dirty than broke. Ricky looked at me. I kept this in case I ever grew a spine again. You just did. We delivered the files directly to the DOJ the next morning. By the end of the week, 4 officers had come forward with sworn affidavits. 3 more had reopened wrongful termination claims from years past. The wall was cracking, but with every crack came pressure. 2 unmarked sedans followed me from the courthouse. Marcy's car was keyed at the grocery store. Anonymous calls came in the middle of the night. Breathing. Then a hang-up. And still I didn't back down, because something had shifted inside me. This wasn't just about the pension anymore. This was about the soul of a department I had once been proud to serve. Then, something unexpected happened. A reporter from the Phoenix Sentinel reached out. Clara Min, local investigative journalist. Sharp, careful, persistent. Mr. Ross, I've been digging into pension freezes for the last 6 months, she said. I think your case is the tip of something very large. You have sources? More than you'd think. But they're scared. I'd like to tell your story. Wes was skeptical. Media attention can backfire. And staying silent let them control the narrative, I countered. We agreed to an off-the-record interview. Clara listened. Recorded. Cross-checked. Then she showed me something that turned my stomach. An internal department memo, marked confidential. From 2018. Targeted retirement risk reduction strategy. Officers within 12-month window of max pension payout should be reviewed for incident thresholds. They had a code name for it. Project Clean Sweep. It was no longer speculation. It was proof. Systemic. Deliberate. And criminal. I forwarded the memo to Agent Kwan. That night, her reply was short. We're moving. Prepare for interviews. Subpoenas inbound. And then, on a quiet Friday morning, the headlines broke. DOJ launches investigation into Phoenix PD over pension fraud scheme. So whistleblower cop blows lid on Project Clean Sweep. 27-year veteran suspended days before retirement. Here's why it matters. I sat on my porch, watching the sun rise. And for the first time in weeks, I smiled. Because the fire they lit to destroy me, I just aimed it back at them. 3 weeks later, I stood on the marble floor of the Maricopa County Superior Court. The walls were cold stone, the hallway full of echoes. Outside, reporters waited. Inside, everything I had built, everything they had tried to erase was on trial. Wes had warned me, they'll paint you as unstable, paranoid, angry. It's the only card they have left. I wore a simple suit. My badge wasn't on my chest anymore. But it was still part of me. Agent Kwan entered first, carrying a locked briefcase. Behind her, Ricky and 2 other former officers flanked our table. We weren't just witnesses anymore. We were plaintiffs. The opposing counsel, Jacob Wells, was smooth, rehearsed, and cocky. He began by attacking my credibility. Mr. Ross was under disciplinary review. His accusations are emotional, not factual. Wes stood calmly. Your Honor, we've submitted documentation of Mr. Ross's exemplary 27-year record, including 13 commendations. No prior disciplinary actions until 3 weeks before his pension vested. Judge Valencia nodded. Proceed. Then came the real hammer. Clara Min's published expose was entered into public record. So were the audio tapes, the Project Clean Sweep memo, the retirement termination timelines, and finally, the DOJ subpoena list 18 names. All active officers, all with suppressed pensions. Delaney sat stiffly on the defense bench, face pale, fingers clenched. He knew what was coming, but so did I, because they had one last card to play. Around 3 p.m., Wells called a surprise witness. My ex-wife. I didn't flinch as she walked in. Her eyes flickered. Guilty? Maybe, but more likely coached. She took the stand. Dan became obsessed, she said, voice shaking. He had files all over the garage, names, photos. He thought the department was out to get him. And did you think he needed help? Wells asked gently. Yes. I begged him to see someone, but he just said I was part of the problem. Was objected. Hearsay. Sustained. But the damage was done. Doubt had been planted. Wes leaned over. They're trying to make this about you, not the fraud. I nodded. Then it's time we make it about them. We called Agent Kwan to the stand. She didn't flinch under cross-examination. The DOE has opened an active investigation based on documentation provided by Mr. Ross and corroborated by other whistleblowers. Our preliminary findings support the existence of Project Clean Sweep. So you're saying there's criminal misconduct? I'm saying there's a pattern of financial conspiracy to deny retirement benefits through fraudulent disciplinary action. Silence. Then, the judge asked the one question I didn't expect. Mr. Ross, why now? Why risk everything at this point in your life? I stood, cleared my throat. Because I watched 18 good men and women disappear into silence. Because every time they fired someone early, they hired 2 rookies at half the cost. And because if I let it happen to me, the next officer never sees their pension either. The courtroom was still, and then Judge Valencia spoke. This case will proceed to full discovery. Injunction on pension freeze is lifted. All documentation from the Phoenix PD will be subpoenaed. Motion for dismissal is denied. I exhaled. For the first time in months, I felt breath reach the bottom of my lungs. Vivet and done. But we were moving forward. Outside, the press surged. Clara was there, mic in hand. Mr. Ross, any comment on today's hearing? Yeah, I said, voice firm. Some badges you earn with years, others with courage. Today, I wore both. That night, Marcy and I sat in the dark living room. The house was quiet. They tried everything, she said. They still might, but now you have light on your side. She reached for my hand. I'm proud of you, Dan. I didn't answer, just held her hand and stared at the boxes still piled in the garage. Evidence, memories, pieces of my life. The battle wasn't over, but the shadows were shrinking. The subpoena orders hit the Phoenix PD like a freight train. Every email, every pension review memo, every IA investigation record from the past 10 years. By the second day, 3 top brass had already retired early. 2 more were placed on administrative leave. 1 resigned mid-shift, left his badge on the sergeant's desk, and vanished. Agent Kwan kept her cards close, but I saw the fire in her eyes. This is bigger than we thought, she told me. There's pressure from DC to go statewide. How many departments? At least 4 in Arizona. Maybe more across county lines. We're tracing fund allocations now. It wasn't just Project Clean Sweep anymore. It was a network. Wes updated me daily. He looked exhausted, but more determined than ever. You've started something that can't be undone, Dan. Good. But with attention came danger. Someone slashed the tires on Clara Min's car. Her editor received threats. The Sentinel's servers were hacked. The DOJ moved Kwan and her team into a federal secure site. I refused relocation. Marcy too. We're not running, she said. We've lived here 20 years. They'll have to do more than scare me. And then the real gut punch came. I found out who leaked my sealed testimony to the defense. It wasn't a stranger. Not an ex-colleague. Not a hacker. It was Marcy's brother, Cal. He'd been working IT security for the city council for years. We'd had beers, holidays, family BBQs. I confronted him in person. Why? They offered me a contract. Said if I flagged anything suspicious, I'd be protecting the department. So you gave them my files. I didn't know they'd twist it, Dan. I thought. You thought you were doing your job. He didn't deny it. I walked away. Didn't punch him. Didn't shout. Just removed his number from my phone. Some betrayals don't deserve closure. The civil trial was set for August. But by mid-June, we had something even bigger. A grand jury indictment. Delaney, 2 pension board directors, 1 deputy chief, wire fraud, racketeering, conspiracy, and best of all, Wells, the defense attorney, was implicated too. Turns out, he wasn't just representing the department. He was laundering kickbacks through shell consulting firms tied to retirement audits. Kwan called it a career case. Clara called it a systemic rot. Wes just called it damn satisfying. We celebrated at Harold's, with cheap bourbon and cold ribs. The men who once feared speaking out were now standing shoulder to shoulder, rebuilding what the system tried to erase. It ain't about the pension anymore, Ricky said. It's about taking our names back. 2 days later, I received a letter from someone I hadn't heard from in 12 years. Captain Reesme, old field training officer. Retired, vanished from public view. His note was short. I've watched everything unfold. I warned them years ago the math didn't add up. They shut me down. I'm ready to testify. He attached 5 internal audits from his time on the pension board. Handwritten notes, anomalies, irregularities, warnings ignored. He'd kept them all. I forwarded them to Wes and Kwan. Then I made a decision. I booked a speaking slot at the National Police Whistleblower Summit in Washington, D.C. Clara came along to document it. You're not afraid? She asked as the plane descended. Of what? Losing more than I already did? Of what comes after? I thought for a moment, then I build what comes next. That's how we win. I stood on that stage beneath the Capitol Rotunda, spoke for 35 minutes. You didn't sugarcoat it. I didn't dramatize. I just told the truth. Of a department that traded duty for dollars. Of men and women betrayed not by criminals, but by the institutions they swore to protect. And when I finished, they stood. All of them. The courtroom smelled of old wood and nerves. 6 weeks after the indictment, the first criminal hearing began. The gallery was full. Every bench, every corner, packed with press, retired officers, widows of former cops who died before seeing justice. Delaney looked smaller than I remembered. He no longer walked with the swagger of a man in charge. His suit didn't fit right. His hairline had retreated. Or maybe that was guilt gnawing through his spine. Wes leaned over. The prosecution's going to focus on racketeering. It's the cleanest route. The pension fraud is ugly, but the wire trails make it tight. I nodded. I didn't need him to explain. I just wanted the lies made public. Testimony after testimony painted the same picture. Terminations filed days before pension thresholds. False misconduct records generated from recycled complaints. Promotions exchanged for silence. Kickbacks disguised as audit fees. It wasn't one bad apple. It was a rotten orchard. And for once, the jury could smell it too. I was called to testify on the 5th day. I walked to the stand with no notes. The oath felt heavier this time. State your name. Daniel James Ross. Occupation? Former police officer. Phoenix PD. 27 years. Why did you come forward? I took a breath. Because a badge used to mean something. And mine was being used to bury people. I told them about the files. About Marcy's brother. About the early warning signs no one wanted to see. He didn't cry, but I saw others in the gallery wiping their eyes. Not because they pitied me, because they recognized their own losses in mine. The verdict came in after 9 days of deliberation. Guilty. On 22 counts of conspiracy, wire fraud, forgery, and racketeering. Delaney was led out in cuffs. 3 others followed within the week. The pension board was disbanded under federal oversight. A multi-state task force was created to audit retirement accounts from the last 15 years. And for the first time in a decade, the phone at Wes's office stopped ringing off the hook with threats. Marcy and I sat on the back porch the day the press release went out. They say you're a hero, she said, flipping through her tablet. I'm just a guy who got tired of lying to himself. Still a hero in my book. She handed me a glass of bourbon. We watched the sun slide behind the desert ridge. Peace had a flavor. It tasted like truth. I turned down 3 book deals, said no to the documentary crew twice, but I did agree to speak at the Arizona Police Academy's graduation ceremony. Wes laughed when I told him, "You, Mr. Anti-Establishment? Someone has to teach them how not to end up like the last guys." The day of the speech, I stood in front of 108 cadets. They looked sharp, eager, unscarred. I looked at their bright eyes and tried to imagine what the world would hand them. "You'll be told that loyalty means silence," I began. "You'll be told that protecting your own means protecting secrets. But real loyalty is earned by truth. And truth is the hardest thing you'll ever carry with that badge." They didn't clap at the end. They just stood. And that was better. Later that night, I visited the cemetery. Ricky had passed away quietly in his sleep 2 weeks earlier. Never saw the full aftermath. But he died with his pension restored, his name cleared. His daughter said he smiled in his sleep. I placed my badge on his gravestone. "We made it, brother. Finally." I sold the house that fall. Too many memories. Marcy and I moved to a small town north of Flagstaff. Built a cabin. Raised chickens. Planted tomatoes. One day, I woke up and realized I hadn't checked the news in 3 days. Didn't miss it. A letter came in the mail the following winter. It was from the DOJ. A commendation. Quiet. Unpublicized. But signed by the Attorney General for unwavering integrity in the face of systemic failure. I stuck it in a drawer. Didn't need a plaque. The silence in my bones was reward enough. Some battles you win with a badge, some with a courtroom, and some just by outlasting the bastards. I did all 3. And when they ask what justice looks like, I tell them, it looks like what remains after the shadows fall.